Hey, Brandon. Daniel Sternberg here. We're at the San Jose airport where we're getting ready to head off to Dallas, Texas for 4 days of 6158 recurrency training for Phil for our Phenom 300. This will be the first time we're not spending the night in Palo Alto since March, and the first time in a hotel since the middle of February. So quite a change, a little bit exciting, a little bit not. We're looking at the numbers in Texas, and they're getting certainly gone in the wrong direction. But we look pretty closely at the data for Dallas and the data for Santa Clara County, where we are in California, and they're looking pretty similar. So I don't feel like we're gone off into a real hot spot or something like that.
Funny how things change. You know, the reason I keep using this music is that it just has such a trepidatious vibe. Pensive, too. The beat rolls on just like life, but there's always that feeling you just can't shake in there, too. The melody, that constant latent elephant in the room that we all just want to go away so much. I guess it depends on where you are. And to be honest, your perspective, your worldview. I mean, what if you're living the dream? Like, we got a plane of your own. There's not too much risk in that, right? Or is there? Don't go away. This is Podcasting on a Plane. I'm Brandon Gonzalez, and you're with me here in the tower at West Coast Delta. On this show, we talk all about the backstories behind what we do in Air World, and if there ever was something I think people wonder about, it's private aviation. For those outside the industry, there's always stuff getting made up about, what goes on in private jets, and who knows, maybe some of it's true, right? But for all of you listening that are here in the industry, we all know that the reality of having your own plane isn't so much about just complete frivolous luxury, but it's about business. I mean, enjoyment too, of course, but in a time like this, it might actually just be about safety, because you've now got the ability to get around without much contact with the outside world. Before, yeah, that was a luxury, but now it's taken on all new meaning. But sometimes, even with your own plane, you're still going to be out in the world at least a little bit. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? And for those who fly things that burn kerosene, yes, even for personal use, you're still going to have to go through recurrent training each and every year. And chances are, that's going to be in a sim center, which is, of course, full of people, locked in little boxes in close proximity. Yeah. Well, what's it like, though? Luckily for us, friends and show supporters Phil and Daniel, well, they just went through it. And they were happy to share their experiences with what it was like to spend the week in Dallas, something nobody really wants to do right about now. And here's the rest of that pre-roll recording I played before.
We've also Phil's looked at CAE's cleaning protocols, and we're pretty confident that if we take responsibility for our behavior, so social distancing, hand washing, and certainly masks whenever we're in public, that we can have a good control over keeping ourselves healthy. So just like all aeronautical decision making, we have a mission we're trying to accomplish. It's a pretty important one, and one that needs to be done in a certain period of time, and we're balancing that against the risks in doing that. And we think we can keep the risks pretty mitigated and keep things under control. Anyway, he's got 2 days of ground followed by 2 days in the sim. It's the sim that's really kind of the most daunting part from a COVID perspective. I'll be joining them for the two days of ground training, and then he'll be doing the sim work with our mentor pilot, Alfa Romeo. I'll keep you up to date on how things are going. Hope you're doing well. Talk to you soon. Bye.
So special thanks to Daniel for recording that, and we're going to be hearing all about how it went in just a minute. But before we get to that, and just like last time, I want to read an article from Airfax that'll remind us where we came from just a few short months ago, actually, and to give some perspective on how things have changed back, and kind of quickly, too. And you're going to hear that in the interview, and get a not-so-surprising but bit of a, well, duh, as you listen. The article is written by James Ivey. He's a 7.6 and 7.4 heavy jet captain for an international freight company. He's got over 10,000 hours, and he learned to fly about 25 years ago as a way to balance the stress of getting an executive MBA degree while also running a family-owned business. The article was published in Airfax, May 11th, 2020. Nothing but silence. As I watch the N1 fluctuate between 89.1 and 89.2, the fuel flow indicates 5,700 pounds an hour per engine, and all's well. All within the airplane seems normal, and yet the silence, it's unnerving, almost unbelievable as we approach a longitude of 30 west. I'm flying across the North Atlantic in a Boeing 767-300 aircraft today. I'm a 767 captain with an international freight company, and I've flown to 6 of the 7 continents, experienced the cold Siberian winters and the heat and humidity of the Congo from the flight deck of the 747 and the 767. Yet today is a completely new experience. Today there's no global terrorist threat or war keeping airplanes out of the sky. The threat? It's a microscopic organism, silent but still deadly as it spreads around the world. On the ground, people's lives have been disrupted in ways small and large. But from 33,000 feet, the silence gives the feeling of a much more dramatic shift, like a Twilight Zone episode, in which everyone below me has disappeared. Normally, even with the use of CPDLC, which is a two-way text-based communication system between pilots and controllers, and with ACARS, it can be a struggle to check in on HF when making the transition from Gander in Canada to Shanwick in Ireland. This is normally the busiest oceanic airspace in the world, with about 1,500 flights a day. But today, I hear nothing but an eerie silence. At the same time, there are other more tangible signs that the world below me has changed. The North Atlantic tracks, usually referred to as NAT tracks, are a series of routes that change daily for the vast amount of traffic typically crossing the Atlantic. But today, and every day now that I fly, the routes are changing in different ways. On this trip, for example, we're flying to Germany, where I'll spend the next week flying between Europe and the Mideast. We have 30 hours of rest in Germany before heading to Dubai's Al Maktoum International Airport in the United Arab Emirates. We take off, and after flying across Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, we head towards Egyptian airspace en route to Dubai. A lot of countries require you to make contact before entering their airspace, and Egypt happens to be one of them. Normally, those calls aren't any big thing, but in this eerie and lockdown world, nothing's routine. As we get close, the first officer's monitoring COM 1 while I start trying to call Cairo control. Despite the lack of traffic on frequency and repeated calls, I can't seem to get a response from Cairo. Finally, just as we enter Egyptian airspace, I make contact, and it's a sign of what to come. We make our way through Egyptian airspace and head towards Saudi Arabian airspace and Jeddah control. ATC hands us off from Jeddah Center to Bahrain Center, only about 40 minutes out from DWC, and when I check in with Bahrain, the controller requests our CON number. We're an augmented crew of 1 captain and 3 first officers, and none of us has ever heard of a CON number. We're now fast approaching DWC, an incredibly high workload period of the flight, and we're searching madly to find this number in the 100 pages of paperwork that makes up our flight plan. Bahrain tells us this is something new in the UAE, and they've just started requesting it. I use the SATCOM to call dispatch. Even they're unsure what the CON number is, but after a brief conference call, a number is provided to us. We still have no idea what a CON number is, but eventually the number we give them works because we're cleared into the UAE airspace. As we approach DWC on short final, I look down and see rows upon rows of idle parked heavy jets lining the taxiways and ramps. The majority of Emirates 380s and 777s are nose to tail covering most of the concrete of the airport. We're the only aircraft on final, and as we land on runway 30, the tower instructs us to exit at Victor 6, the last high-speed taxiway. Tower switches us over to ground, and once again, there's nothing but silence. DWC is one of the busiest airports in the Mideast, and it's the middle of the afternoon, and we're the only aircraft moving at the airport. Just like the silence in the air, the utter stillness on the ground has the eerie feel of something out of the Twilight Zone. Life soon appears, however. A requirement for entry into the UAE is a health check. This is a new requirement that a lot of countries have started since the pandemic begun. The vans show up soon to transport us to the health center for our mandatory check. This involves completing several pages of paperwork and then a temperature check and a nasal COVID-19 test. Next, we're taken to security screening and immigration. The time from opening the aircraft door to our arrival at the hotel door was 4 hours. The next morning, we taxi out between the rows of aircraft amid the same surreal silence and stillness as if we're the only active aircraft and crew left in the world. Our next destination is Kuwait International, KWI, and after the challenges of yesterday, we're hoping for a relatively smooth day of flying today. But in this new normal, well, nothing's going smoothly. As we enter Kuwait airspace and begin the STAR, Kuwait ATC asks us for our destination. We confirm our destination is KWI. Kuwait control involves us that KWI is close to incoming flights, takes us off the arrival, and gives us vectors away from the city. It's only a 2-hour flight from Dubai, and we've been following our filed flight plan, which includes landing permits for KWI. We relay the landing permits again to the Kuwait controllers, who tell us to stand by. And after a couple more vectors and a descent to 12,000 feet, I call ATC again, and I'm again told to stand by. In the 767, when the calculated fuel burn to the destination and alternate drops below our reserve fuel level, we get a insufficient fuel message on the FMS. It's one of those messages you never like to see. As the insufficient fuel message appears on the FMS, I query KWI ATC one more time. And once again, the answer is stand by. Most captains tend to add a bit more fuel to the minimum reserve level for a bit of comfort, but I'm fast approaching the edge of my comfort zone. Once again, we pass our landing permit numbers again to ATC and tell them if we don't get vectors towards the airport, I'll be declaring a fuel emergency and we'll be coming in to land, Once again, their only response is stand by. In some parts of the world, approaching fuel minimums for one airport wouldn't make me overly concerned because there'd be countless other airports we could have access to. In the Mideast, however, that's not the case. I'm pretty sure Iran would not be happy with us dropping in for a bit of fuel unannounced. Fortunately, I don't have to find out because ATC gives us vectors and we're clear to land. While the Kuwait airport does not have as many jets parked around the airport as Dubai, perhaps because Dubai is such an international hub, there's still a significant number of empty idle airplanes lining the taxiways and ramps. And after a relatively quick turn, we head back to Germany. The only other aircraft I hear on frequency during the 7-hour return flight is one lonely FedEx freighter. In all my years of flying, I've never experienced anything like this. Even after 9/11, the airlines returned to the sky more quickly and in larger numbers. Before the pandemic, it was easy to complain about crowded frequencies and long wait times before takeoff, but to experience a complete absence of traffic, silent frequencies, unnerved controllers and health inspectors, and major international hubs looking more like the aircraft boneyards at Davis-Monthan, well, it's a sobering and surreal experience, and it puts all those old irritations in a whole new perspective. Flying across Europe last week, I noticed more traffic in the skies, and I hope that continues, and things are able to return to normal soon. Believe it or not, I actually missed trying to break in on HF to give a position report. Again, that article in Airfax by James Ivey. All right, time for Torture in a Time of COVID reality check number 2, with friends and Phenom 300 owners Daniel and Phil. And Daniel and Phil, welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for being here to share your experience.
Very cool to be here. Thank you for having us.
All right, so you two are owner-operators of a Phenom 300, which probably is really the dream for a lot of people. So can you give us a little bit of background and just kind of tell us a story of how that came about and why you chose that aircraft and what you use it for?
Yeah, well, we're about 18 months into this journey of being owner-operator pilots of our Phenom 300, and it's been an amazing experience. I had flown and owned a Mooney and a Malibu back in the 90s, and have a long flying career, but it hung up doing any flying for almost 20 years due to some problems with my eyes that I was able to have an operation and get corrected a couple years ago and get a medical again. And my dream was to have a jet for, forever, just because I love aviation, and somehow the world conspired to let that dream come true for us. And so we were able to buy this Phenom. We chose the Phenom just because it is the biggest, baddest jet that can be flown single pilot. And while Daniel and I fly it largely together, we felt like that ability to really be and have the single pilot freedom was going to be perfect for us.
Sure. And has it been all you thought it would be and more?
It's been all we thought it would be and more. It's been like drinking from a fire hose, in some sense, learning to fly the plane. And that was an experience itself. We spent, essentially the entire year of 2019. I did an intensive training, got my type rating in the first 3 or 4 days after starting to fly the plane. But that was, as the mentor pilots called, highly tethered, both from insurance and from, any kind of sensibility. And then I got down to spending literally the next 500 hours in the plane with mentor pilots. These were all airline pilots that also do light jet teaching, and had the opportunity to just, literally put on, almost 500 hours in the plane throughout 2019. That caused my insurance company finally at the end of 2019 to cry uncle and say, sure, we'll insure you for single pilot. And so got the clearance at the end of last year to start flying our plane without a CFI on board. And Daniel and I have put on now another about 250 hours, even now in the virus world, continuing to fly the plane and start this journey of mastery towards really flying it like we know what we're doing.
Sure. Well, and I just for everybody listening here, a fun little side fact about this is your very first flight together without a mentor pilot was to where?
To Carlsbad, I think, to Palomar. I think, right?
That was our first
we
one.
told you that. Yeah.
It was the only time, I think, that we were very glad to have an FAA employee standing outside our plane when we opened the door.
And that, of course, was me. And I thought it was pretty cool that your first flight was down to my airport. That was pretty neat. So, Daniel, let's hear a little bit about you too as well. Your flying background and what it's like to have come up in this world of jet ownership and to be certified in it now as well.
Yeah, Phil got me into flying back in the 90s when he got back into flying, and I took lessons, got my private pilot. But while he had gotten his instrument and multi back then, I went for a couple of years just as a VFR private pilot before my work life just got too crazy and I wasn't flying enough, and so I figured that chapter was behind me. But then Phil, after his eye surgery, decided to get back into it, and I said, well, I'll be as supportive as I can. I'll get back into it and do what I can. But it's like, I don't know if I'm gonna like flying a jet. That seems like a pretty big bite to chew off. But I got back into it. Got my instrument rating last March. Got my multi rating in August, and took a couple of lessons with one of our mentor pilots in the Phenom. And the first time I flew that plane, I was hooked. It's an amazing machine. It's a lot of fun to fly. Got my type rating in January, and then of course COVID hit, and I haven't had a chance to do much instruction in it since then. So looking forward to getting back into improving my ease and facility in the aircraft. Of course, I've been flying right seat with Phil, flying as crew for since last November. But it's just been an amazing sort of whirlwind ride for me, and I'm loving it.
Sure. So where do you two take it when you go fly, especially now?
Well, in COVID, when we fled New York on Friday, March 13th, which was just as things were getting really, really bad with the outbreak in New York City looming, and arrived back in San Jose and Santa Clara County, where the next day, the next Monday, the first in the nation stay-at-home order happened. So we were kind of, holy moly, what happened now? We just flew home to San Jose, and now we're staying at home. What do we do with the plane? And realized that it had been classified as an essential activity and that the FBO was open. And we decided that rather than mothball the engines or something, we would keep flying, and figured we could drive to the FBO, get in the plane, be not within 6 feet of anybody. Nobody else is in our plane besides ourselves. And so we just started to do lots of local trips. And it's been fun. We've been into LAX, we've been into SFO, we've been into Las Vegas, we've been into, sort of getting into some big airports, and we land and taxi back. And, ATC's been pretty accommodating, even at LAX and a few places, of letting us kind of do the fly in, taxi back, and depart. And so we've been just doing that kind of flying up until our training flight to Dallas we did a couple of weeks ago, which we can talk about, of just making sure we keep ourselves current in the plane in good operating condition.
Sure. Now, how long can the plane sit before you have to do a little bit of a getting it back in the air sort of renovation?
Really only a couple of weeks, and then they want to have the engine start to at least be ground run, or if it's going to be longer than that, then they have a more mothball procedure that's done. But after 15 days, they want things to start to take place. It's fairly short cycle, and as I started to think about it, a choice of having a mechanic come out and run my engines on the ground, which I could have happen, or go fly the plane and keep my skills up. We decided that flying the thing is the right way to go, and it's worked out really well. But it's been quite a, I think for a lot of owner operators, it's been quite a shock to figure out what to do with their planes, and I know a lot of people are still struggling through that.
So, of course, once a year, the big R rolls around, recurrent training, which of course you have to stay insured and all that fun stuff. So, unfortunately, unlike having just one person come out and fly with you in, your Meridian or something like that, you actually have to go somewhere with a sim. And that, obviously, in times of COVID is maybe a sketchy proposition, but it came up for you and you had to deal with it. So, what was it like as the date came closer?
Yeah, well, I'm realizing now as an owner operator, single pilot, that this annual cycle is going to be part of my routine forevermore. Technically the FAA just requires an annual check ride that could be done in the airplane, but the insurance company is absolutely strident at this point that their pilots, to get coverage, go through annual training, 4-day recurrent training in the simulator. And that makes good sense, because you can absolutely do things there's no other way to train. And so it was either get down to Dallas, where the only option is for the Phenom 300 in North America or in the West to do that, or stop flying the plane. So we kind of swallowed hard and decided we needed to do it. They had a slot for 4 days over last weekend in the latter part of June, and we decided to get down to Dallas and go ahead and do it. It was scary because we knew that we were, had been living a socially distanced life and believed in that, and we knew that Dallas had been a place that had unlocked early and was having restaurants open and bars open, and so we knew we were going not only for flight training, but into a very different kind of health zone, we thought. And so we kind of bucked up and flew on down and did that and got into the class. It was scary, I would say, to do it, because you realize that this simulator facility has 25 or 30 sims, and rows and rows of classrooms, and 2 to 10 people coming through each classroom every day. And so they're moving a lot of people from all over the world through this facility, which sort of sounds like a recipe for trouble, if you ask me.
Absolutely. So as something like that comes up, I mean, obviously the companies have to be very wary of that because they don't want to be transmitting the illness. They need to protect their employees and so on. So what were they doing sort of protocol wise to keep everyone safe while you're there?
Protocols were surprisingly thin, in my opinion. They had ordered their employees to wear masks. But as part of this, national dialogue we've been having about masks, the actual policy was that students were welcome to wear masks or not. I would say it was about a third did and 2/3 didn't. Upon entering the facility, you had to do an affirmation every time that you hadn't you felt okay and hadn't been to certain other countries in the last 14 days. And they spaced classrooms out a little bit, so people were sitting at kind of every other seat. But that was kind of about it. And it felt like real activities were being taken, but it wasn't very much in the grand scheme of things when you're still sitting in a classroom with 10 or 12 other people and an instructor for 2 days for 8 or 10 hours a day. That was minimalist. Then you're getting in the big aluminum box, the sim, that is, which is a whole different situation. That's a simulator that they're literally putting 3 or 4 people through every 4 hours, 5 sessions a day, so 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, 300 days a year. So very intensive utilization, where of course you can't be a pilot without touching everything. And safety there is really, a bunch of alcohol wipes and clean up the cockpit as best you can before you fly it 3 or 4 hours and turning it over to the next pilot. So it's a little bit of a leap of faith. And so while everybody's being very sane and sober, it's on your mind every minute of the 4 days I was at the flight training.
And then when it comes to sort of wiping everything down, I mean, I'm sure the wipes are provided and everybody was help cleaning, but was there any like additional time, for instance, given to sanitize in between, or any specific people that did it, or was it just sort of if you want to clean before you do it, or if not, then don't?
No, it was, at this is, one of the, premier sim training facilities in the world. So it's not like a second order shop or anything like that. It is literally scheduled 4 hours, back to back to back. And, you watch the previous, training crew walks out of the simulator, and you walk down in, and, your simulator check pilot hands you some alcohol wipes, and you get right to prepping the cockpit and get into it. And so that's their, and they, I think they're probably doing something during the, they always schedule 4 hours a day downtime, mostly for maintenance and repair of these things. And they're, I'm sure doing a deeper sanitation that one time, but it is pretty minimalist if you're the fourth or fifth crew through the day.
And then obviously you had to stay there for several days. What was it like staying at a hotel?
Well, that was a little shocking. We stayed at the Four Seasons Resort, or a fancy resort hotel, a little bit to, just be not in a place that was everybody that was then doing the simulator training, and to be in a bigger room, and a casita out on the golf course. But we no longer got there. No sooner got there, but discovered there was a wedding with 250 people in their grand ballroom. Nobody wearing masks, people dancing and in each other's faces, having loud, conversations, and lots of sales guys in the bar having, meeting each other like long lost brothers. That are part of my past experience in business, but is something that I wasn't even considering that I was going to encounter. And literally, that environment at that time felt like I had, Doc Daniel and I had beamed into a pre-COVID world. It was kind of something. So we stayed in our masks and tried to be kind of careful on the side of all of that. But it was an experience.
I bet. And then, unfortunately now, I hate to point it out, but they're having some of the biggest spikes of anywhere in the country right now. And we're looking at, what, about 2 weeks after you guys were there?
Yeah, it's been 8 or 9 days now since we were there. We left actually. This is day 8, and so we're kind of crossing our fingers that we're good. But literally, immediately after we left, is the governor. Well, while we were there, allowed the city to at least ask people to wear masks, and Dallas did do that just as we got ready to leave, and then they've now closed the bars and some other things that looked pretty necessary because you could just see how this culture of people starting to go out and do nightlife was just kind of asking for it from my point of view.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's just such a political thing at this point, which I don't know. If you ask me, I still don't really understand because it's literally just about safety and health at this point, nothing more, nothing less. But unfortunately, it's been heavily politicized, and that's really too bad because I know that we all want to go out and live our lives and do our things, and I feel like if like I'm not anti things being open, I'm very for things being open. I'm just anti doing irresponsible things. And unfortunately, when people aren't responsible, then it starts getting spread around. And that's really unfortunate because now looks like we're starting to pay again for that. So, okay.
Yeah, you just realize this powerful attraction, this human attraction. And I felt it even as keen as I was trying to not, oh, it's okay to let our guard down for just a minute and, taste a little bit of how life used to be. And that's, it's very human. And it's going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah. I mean, we're all sick and tired of it across the board. Everybody wants to go back, but I don't think the virus cares about what we want. It's there no matter how we feel about it, unfortunately. So that is unfortunate. Okay. So then upon coming home and then sort of finally being able to, I guess, metaphorically breathe heavily again, what does it feel like now that you're home? You've got another year when things will probably be a lot different till you need to go do this again. And you're a week in, so you've only got a few more days until you hit that magic 14 days where you didn't get it while you're there. How does it feel to breathe easy?
Well, it feels much better to breathe easy. I have to say, the combination of having, what really felt like fleeing New York City right before they just went into, I that flight home. It was a 7.5 hour flight because we were fighting the worst headwinds of any of our transcons that we had. So it was a miserable long flight home. And I think my heart was racing at 130 beats the whole way. Just the fight or flight response. That sense of adrenaline. And I had a little bit of that same thing leaving as we left Fort Worth for San Jose last week. Of just kind of, I want to get home and I want to get to a safe zone. And so, to have had now a couple of these experiences of kind of, just getting home and now, counting time has been, a very interesting experience because I'm not used to that emotion of that kind of fear response, right? And it's been very interesting. So we're counting the days. We think at 8 days here we're pretty good, and we'll give it another few, and then we really will relax.
All right. Well, what will it take for you to feel comfortable going back to your place in New York again?
Oh, I think we're gonna do that just as soon as we're through the 14 days. Right now, we're keeping a careful eye, and at some sense, living carefully in Santa Clara County or living carefully in New York City, given that they're actually have pretty good success still, and knock on wood, we hope that stays. So we're going to do that pretty fast, and continue to be very cognizant of how we act and where we go and wear masks and all those things, but it does feel like it's something we can do safely, and so we're going to get ourselves back to New York just as soon as we can. And frankly, Europe, we took our phenom to Europe last September and had just a great trip, and had actually planned to do it in April or May of this year. We had 2 trips on the schedule to be back in Europe, and that obviously wasn't in the cards, but we're still looking at when and how we can get back to doing some of those things, although we know it might be a long wait here till we get to a safer zone.
Well, to close us out here then, what are your final thoughts on what people can do when they need to go to Recurrent training, how they can select a place to go, what they do while they're there, and how they can get through the experience that you had safely as well?
Well, I think it is an inevitability, and in many cases, people doing recurrent training don't have a lot of options for where to go, and the facilities and resources are really scheduled, so you have to kind of take what you can get. I think wear a mask, be safe and sane, realize and understand that you're going to be mixing with other people, and so take it deadly seriously. That if you're feeling bad or you think that there's anything that you've been exposed to, honor your fellow pilots and honor your fellow citizens, and don't go do it. Make a good decision, and then while there, I think again, you know, do everything possible to just comply with, is everybody trying to do their best, and get to the other side, and try to do everything you can to think about the other people you're sharing that space with, and that's what we can all do. It's a lesson for everything, but it's really magnified in the simulator training, and I think it's all we can do if we want to keep flying safely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys both for sharing this experience. I really hope that people get a lot out of it, and I also thank you for your support of the show over the years. This has been great. Thank you so much.
You bet. Great talking to you, Brandon.
I want to thank those guys for coming on the show to share their experience. It's just something else, right? Let me know your thoughts on life as we know it. Send me an email, brandon@podcastingonaplane.com, or record something. You can use your smartphone or the SpeakPipe widget that pops up each time you visit podcastingonaplane.com. And while you're there, maybe consider supporting the show, because if you find value in it, I'd really appreciate having you on board as a patron. Or if you're not into the recurring thing, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/Bravo Golf and do a one-time thing in increments of just $3. If you want to stay sharp on the mic, make sure to use the affiliate code DELTA at plainenglishsim.com and get 10% off the best smartphone-based ATC simulator around. Link, of course, in the show notes. And I just talked with the owner, and there's some new fun stuff coming out. And as always, I thank you so much for your support in whatever form it takes, and for listening to the show and passing the word along about this or any of your favorite aviation podcasts. As the thing drags on in the unknown future, I want to make sure that despite the constant gloom and stress caused by everything in the world right now, that we remember that we still have a lot of power to affect what comes next. So please, make good choices, stay safe, and most importantly, stay healthy. That's all for now. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day.
The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. Brandon's comments and those of his guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc., are not part of his official responsibility as a controller or as an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are his, and those of his guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. Also, while he's a CFI, he's not acting as your CFI, nor is he your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice or legal counsel. If you're in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.